Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k. Today we've got a Tyranids video. We're doing a rate it or hate it, and this time we're going to be looking at the Tyranids Exocrine, whatever you want to call it, from the Tyranids Codex. So rate it or hate it, what are we doing? We're going to go through the data card. We are going to be going through my personal tactics, just my tactics, maybe not yours, but we're going to go through what I do with my Exocrine. We're going to go through some comparisons, what units are similar or alternative to your Exocrine, and then at the end of the video I'm going to be rating or hating the Exocrine. So there's no in-betweens, as you know, it's one or the other. It is quite cutthroat. Anyway, let's move into the data card. Right, data card for the Exocrine. We're on 120 by 92mm base, if that means anything. It's quite a large base, to be fair. Of course, it's a monster, that's why it's on a large base. 135 points. Which is pretty cheap, to be honest with you. It's pretty cheap. We're going to see why as we go through this data card. We've got the movement of 8 inches, which is nice, especially on that large base. We're getting around pretty nicely. Toughness is 10, which is also decent. It's decent. 3+ armor, no invulnerable save. 14 wounds, however. It's quite a nice bit of wounds there. Less than 10 points a wound. Can't complain too much. Leadership is 8+. We do have Synapse, so it's not the end of the world. And the OC is 4. For 135 points, OC 4 is what you'd expect when you're talking about monsters. The range side of things, we've got the Bioplasmic Cannon, which is the sort of the main reason for taking this guy. It's got Blast and it's also got Heavy. So for every 5 models, you can have an additional attack. And if you stay stationary, you're going to get a +1 to your attack. Beautiful. 36-inch range, also beautiful. Attacks, D6 +3. That's a nice amount of attacks. Average of what? What's that? 7 or 8? Is that an average of 7 or 8? No, it's an average of 6 or 7. My maths went all over the place there. An average of 6 or 7 attacks without Blast. If you've got Blast, you can add another 1, another 2, another 3, another 4 even, depending on the unit size you're going up against. Ballistic skill 3+, potentially 2s if you're staying still. Strength is 8, but that's okay because it's -3 AP and 3 damage. Now, in previous editions, you would class this as an anti-tank, but realistically, 10th edition, it's not. It's more of an anti-elite infantry kind of weapon. I say infantry, it doesn't have to be infantry, it could be beasts, it could be mounted and so on, but the elite kind of style multi-wound models, maybe 3. I mean, Terminators with the shields have got 4, so not quite those, but that kind of caliber. Without the shields, maybe, not bad. But because we're strength 8, it means we're wounding toughness 4 on 2s, we're wounding toughness, right up to toughness 7 in fact, we're wounding on 3s. Toughness 8 on 4s, and then anything beyond that, you're wounding on 5, so it's not as worth it. But again, this Tyranid Codex does seem to lack in the strength department, apart from Old One Eye and the Neurothropes and the Tyrannifex. There's a few others in there as well, but there's not many that go beyond in terms of strength. So we've got to live with that. But at least we've got a lot of attacks with this, and that's, I think, the reason for taking it. It's very good for that aspect. Now, melee, it's okay. No, it's not. It's actually rubbish. Let's not pretend. It's only got 3 attacks, hitting on 3s. Strength 7, no AP, 2 damage. It can defend itself to kind of remove a model here and there. But with only 3 attacks, don't expect too much. You're probably going to be wounded on 3s. And yeah, 3 attacks, you can't expect anything. So yeah, I was lying a little bit there. Melee side of it isn't great. Ability wise, you've got Delete Demise D3. Cool. Synapse. Cool. Synaptic targeting. So in your shooting phase, after this model was shot, select one enemy unit that was hit by one of these attacks. Until the end of the phase, each time a Tyranids model makes an attack against that same unit, they get to reroll hit rolls over 1. It's going to be really good for your Neurothropes. As an example, they're your best sort of shooter unit. Maybe your Tyranid Warriors perhaps with the range weapons. Maybe your Tyrannifex again. All of those could be re-rolling hit rolls over 1, providing that this thing has shot first and hits. Now, the problem I've got with that ability is, let's say you're going after those Terminators without the shields. That's an example that we used earlier on. They've got 3 wounds apiece. That's okay for this weapon, but if you've got a Tyrannifex with a Rupture Cannon, that doesn't really want to be firing at them. So, gaining the benefits of re-rolling 1s isn't as useful. But in some situations it can be useful. Again, it could be the Neurothropes as an example. They kind of do work on all kinds of different targets. So you've got to watch out how you synergize with the Exocrine with this ability in particular. So there is a damage table. Once it gets below 5 wounds or less, it's a -1 to the hit roll, so it kind of nullifies that heavy in a way if you do stay still. But if you do move, you can be hitting on a 4+. So not where you want to really be with your Exocrine. Let's move into my tactics then. So what am I doing with the Exocrine? So in general, when I've got Exocrines in my list, I like to take a couple of them. I think one isn't enough. They're fairly cheap, 135 points for one, 270 points for two. I tend to take two, and I ensure that I've got the same sort of line of sight again. Zoanthropes. Have I said Neurothropes? Well, this time I think I've been saying Neurothropes. That's the leader. I'm talking about Zoanthropes, of course. I'm just thinking 9th edition. I don't know what I was thinking. The Zoanthropes, the ones that can shoot. You want to share the same line of sight with your Exocrine so that you can make use of that rerolls of 1s to hit. Again, the Tyranids, if you've got the right weapon or the right target perhaps. Maybe Gargoyles if you want the volume of attacks, but you can use them for their strength 5 perhaps. There's all different units that can shoot from the Tyranids Codex. Now ideally the Exocrine stays stationary for the heavy keyword, pretty much all battle if you can. So really it should be sitting on objectives, because there's no point wasting a model or a monster in particular with OC4 that's not on an objective. You may as well sit him on one if it's got the heavy keyword. Now 36-inch range is nice. It feels slightly shorter than other heavier options from other factions, so you may need to use turn 1 to get into a better position. You probably will anyway. You're going to get into some sort of cover or get out of cover, get a better line of sight. Depends how you've deployed and how your opponent's deployed as well. But as far as detachments go, I think all detachments kind of work with it, because, I mean, I'll shout out a little sub-par detachment here, which is the Crusher Stampede. Of course, it's a monster. But I personally like to use the Synaptic Nexus, I think, because, well, my tactics, first of all, you get the 5+ invulnerable save from the Synaptic Imperative, which is useful because it doesn't have an invuln. Now, it's only for one battle round, but you've got the stratagem where, what's it called now? The Imperative Dominant stratagem, so you can use it again in another battle round. Maybe you don't want to use it on the Exocrine, maybe you do, but you've got the option if you wanted to have that invulnerable save if it does get targeted, if your opponent does not like that damage 3. Now, although the stratagem does end in your next command phase, the actual detachment rule, which is what you would normally use, that ends at the end of the battle round. So there's probably going to be some crossover if you go second, in fact. Maybe there is. In this detachment, you want to be pairing with the Tyranid Warriors or Zoanthropes. Again, I've already kind of mentioned them a few times now, although I did say that they were Neurothropes earlier on. They've got Synapse, so in the Synaptic Nexus, providing Synapse, of course, is the way to go. You want the Synaptic Link thing going off everywhere. Or is that a 9th edition phrase? Synaptic Link? That's a 9th edition phrase, isn't it? Ignore that phrase, I just meant Synapse. There's also the Override Instinct stratagem, which allows your unit to fall back and shoot and charge, or charge. We don't really care about the charging. Now, the Exocrine is a monster, so it can fire out of engagement, but it can't fire into its own engagement because of the blast keyword. So if you want to get rid of that unit that's tagging your Exocrine, maybe you want to fall back and then shoot at it to try and nullify it before it gets to charge you again. Maybe you might need a little bit of help from another nearby unit just to clear that unit away so that you don't get tagged on the next round. Now, comparisons. You're basically bringing up all the shooter units for comparison, aren't you? I mean, the Zoanthropes, they aren't monsters, they're not monsters, but they've got the flexibility with their weapons. They don't just target infantry, or whatever you want to call it, beasts, swarms, mounted. They're not just anti that. They can also be anti-tank if you wanted them with their strength 12. You'd want 6 of them, I suppose, which is quite a lot more in terms of points cost. It's not 135 points for 6 Zoanthropes, is it? Other monsters, you've got the Screamer Killers off the top of my head. You've got Trigons. Trigons are only 1 damage though, so probably count them out here. They're not going to really compete with damage 3 and -3 AP. Carnifexes can take the heavy venom cannons, but only D3 shots and not D6+3 with blast. It's not even got the heavy keyword either, has it? Although they can go with old one-eye Carnifexes, which is kind of cool for the rerolls. So it's a whole different kind of synergy right there. Malceptors, they've got the D6+3 and they've got the damage 3 and they've got blast. So this is a better comparison. Better strength, in fact, at strength 10, which is quite rare. Slightly less in AP, so they're slightly better in terms of they can go for slightly tougher opponents' units. but no heavy keyword, but it means they can move, I suppose. And they are costing 170 points, not 135 points. So you are paying premium for those units. They do fight better though, which of course is where the points are. That's why you're paying an extra 35 points for them. But they'd probably be better in the Crusher Stampede detachment, I think. Then there's the big Tyranid effects, of course. I just think they're all the gear and no idea. I mean, yes, they have been pushed down in points with the new recent update. They used to be 245, I think they're now 190 off the top of my head, so they are definitely much more affordable. So let's get on to the rate it or hate it side of this video. What am I doing with the Exocrine? I think this one's an easy one, to be honest with you. I really like these. A lot of people really like these. Take them in 2s, take them in 3s even. They're tough enough for the points cost. They do enough damage for the points cost. And yeah, I think they're pretty good. They're cheap and they're good, and they also buff other units, which is also a little bonus. So for me, it's a thumbs up. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments down below.